It seems like the labor pains have started. As a first-time mom, I was filled with anxiety. Being far from my hometown, a trip back for childbirth was out of the question. However, my in-laws' house is only about a 10-minute walk away. With a good relationship with my in-laws, I planned to rely on them if anything happened as I prepared for childbirth. My due date was yesterday. Just as my husband left for work and it was conceivable that I could give birth at any time, something that felt like labor pains began. I just arrived at work. It's not like the baby will be born right away. Let me know if anything changes. Despite my anxieties, my husband seemed indifferent. Looking back, I realized that his behavior had been strange for some time. My name is Ellie. I quit my job when I found out I was pregnant and am now a 32-year-old full-time housewife. My husband, George, is 2 years older and was a senior at the university I attended. We reunited at a university club gathering 3 years ago and hit it off. Considering our age, we decided to get married soon after. I was happy to be able to get married while still in my late 20s. George's job is demanding, and he often comes home late or has to work on his off days, which only adds to my anxieties. But my mother-in-law occasionally checks on me, and she was a great help when my morning sickness was severe. She's looking forward to the birth of her grandchild, and for her sake as well, I want to deliver a healthy baby. My father-in-law has also driven me to the hospital a few times. I've been blessed with wonderful in-laws. And then there was yesterday, my due date. Seeing no changes in my condition made me anxious. It's the due date, but the baby hasn't come out yet, huh? When I voiced my worries to George before he left for work, he became irritated as he hurriedly prepared to leave. If the labor pains haven't started, it means it's not time yet. There's no point in overthinking it. The baby will come out when it's ready. He left for work after saying this indifferently. It's not that I wanted him to do anything in particular. I just wanted him to understand and empathize with my anxious feelings. We've argued about this several times during my pregnancy. George always says, "There's no point in overthinking. Things will work out. Does worrying achieve anything?" Maybe he's right, but giving birth is a matter of life and death. He was indifferent when my morning sickness was severe and when I had painful contractions. When we found out I was pregnant, he was so happy. What happened? I'm going to be a dad. I remember how delighted he was when we went shopping for baby supplies together. But slowly, his attitude changed. And by the time I reached the stable period of my pregnancy, he had become noticeably cold. Maybe it was because work was particularly busy at the time. But I wished he would listen more, show more concern. With these feelings, I've made it to today. Even today, a day past the due date, George left for work with his usual expression. Despite my frustrations, I prioritized the baby in my belly and managed to see George off with a normal expression. And about an hour later, that's when what seems like labor pains began. I tried calling the hospital, but they told me to wait and see since my contractions were still far apart. I prepared my hospital bag and rested, waiting for the time to come. By the afternoon, my contractions were getting closer together, and so I called a taxi and went to the hospital. I tried to call George, but he didn't answer, so I sent him an email and admitted myself to the hospital right away. I couldn't rely on my in-laws either, as they were at work. From that point on, all I remember is enduring the intense pain. The pain was excruciating, and I felt alone and anxious. I felt like I was going to pass out from the pain several times. George finally arrived at the hospital in the evening, and to make things worse, he seemed to have had some alcohol. Really? Today of all days? Even after I told him I was in labor? He excused himself saying, "I had a sudden drinking party, but I only had 1 beer. He seemed proud, almost as if he thought not having more than 1 beer was something commendable. This drove me mad. What? Even 1 beer is still drinking. You reek of alcohol. Don't come into my room like this. Get out. Between the bellyache and the smell of alcohol, I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. At that point, a nurse who came to check on me kicked George out and I was left alone once again. I spent a restless night and before I knew it, it was morning. It seems like the baby will be born soon. After moving to the delivery room and waiting for a while, George, who seemed to have sobered up by then, came in. What does he want now? I wanted to say that, but I didn't even have the energy to speak. Finally, my son was born safely. Despite nearly passing out from the pain, I felt relieved when I saw my son crying healthily. When the nurse handed my son to George, he hesitated but eventually held him. I was vaguely thinking, so he's a dad now, when George made an outrageous remark. "He doesn't look like me at all. Whose kid is this?" Saying that, he pushed our son back to the nurse. What? I didn't understand what was happening and glared at George. "Get out!" Even though I didn't want to speak because of the pain, I told George succinctly, and he left the room without a word. What is he thinking? Could such a thing happen? I didn't have the energy to worry about what had happened to George, and I was just furious. My son was taken to the nursery and I was taken to my room, but I couldn't rest because I was too angry. Still, because I was so exhausted, I fell asleep without realizing it. Taking care of my son kept me busy every day, and my 5-day hospital stay flew by. George came to see our son and me from time to time, but because we were in separate rooms, we only spent a few minutes together. My mother-in-law accompanied me when I was discharged, but George apparently went to work. My mother-in-law, who seemed oblivious to George's antics, adored and cared for our son, telling how cute my baby boy is all the time. My father-in-law, who had left work early, also came to our house. He and my mother-in-law looked after our son, so I was able to rest a bit. I was truly grateful to my in-laws. In the evening, as my mother-in-law was preparing dinner, George came home. Welcome back. I greeted him, but he was cold and unresponsive. As soon as he entered the living room, he pulled an envelope out of his bag. Without even holding our son, he smirked and called me over. Ellie, I have something to talk about. I was annoyed by his attitude, but what happened next was even more unbelievable. George took out some documents from the envelope and thrust them in my face. I had it tested. It's not my child, so we're getting a divorce. This proves your affair. What? I couldn't help but let out a strange sound, and my mother-in-law's hand stopped as she was cooking. My father-in-law, who was holding our son, froze and looked at George. Despite the three of us being dumbfounded, George had a smug look on his face. When he was born, I thought he didn't look like me at all, so I secretly had a DNA test done. And? I sighed and prompted him to continue. So, look at this. The document he showed me had some complicated words and numbers, but I read aloud the sentence that caught my eye. The tested individual cannot be excluded as the biological father. George snorted confidently. Excluded means I'm not the father, right? What? Zero reading comprehension? I calmly retorted. If he's not excluded, it means you are the father. Then George started to panic. What? No way. I remembered what happened during the birth and became angry again. So you said all those things back then because you suspected me of cheating? I clearly remember George saying, "Whose kid is this?" when he saw our newborn son. I said it in front of my in-laws. They were furious. George, how could you? What were you thinking, doing that to Ellie when she was going through so much? As George was scolded by his parents, he started to make excuses. Well, Ellie's workplace was full of men, and she often went to drinking parties. There were days when she came home late, so of course I'd be worried. I started to get annoyed with George, who was glancing at me as he spoke. Look, I reported every drinking party, and you even picked me up when I was going to be late, remember? And still you suspected me? But George still laughed as if he was right. Well, you know, I've seen stories on the internet about people raising their affair partner's child, right? When I was talking to a coworker, they said I should have a DNA test done. Oh, I see. There might be no point in talking to this man. Really? You took the word of the internet and some stranger over me? You trusted the stories of people you don't even know instead of me? My anger wouldn't subside. I struggled with morning sickness and went through a tough labor just to give birth to a healthy child for you, George. And this is what you were thinking? My mother-in-law broke down in tears, and my father-in-law was furious. I can't believe this! As I angrily slapped the documents out of George's hand, he tried to pick them up but dropped his bag, and something unexpected fell out. I couldn't believe my eyes. What's this? There was a divorce form in George's bag. Are you planning to divorce? Suddenly, George lost all his earlier momentum and became flustered. No, this isn't, I found myself no longer able to tolerate his attitude. You've gone to the trouble of preparing divorce papers, and now you're telling me you don't want a divorce? I snatched the divorce papers, clutching a pen tightly. My husband tried to stop me, but in that moment, his smartphone rang. It was the sound of an incoming email. My hand, clutching the pen, stopped. I had a bad feeling about this. When did his behavior and words start to seem strange? It had been weird since summer, after spring had passed. What is this unease? On impulse, I snatched my husband's phone. Holding back my husband, who was trying to retrieve it in a panic, I unlocked the screen. Displayed, there was something unbelievable. I read it out loud. Have you filled out the divorce papers yet? It wasn't your child anyway, right? Claim alimony from your wife, and let's go on a lavish trip. What's this? My bad feeling turned out to be true. I thought it was strange. You suddenly accused me of cheating, and I wondered where that idea came from. Could it be because you were the one cheating? That's it, isn't it? That's why you thought I was cheating too. My husband's face turned pale. Who is this woman? Could it be from a new employee or something? You must have become the person in charge of the new employees this spring and got close to her, right? That makes sense. Your behavior started to change because you were cheating with her. That's why you were coming home late and claiming to work on holidays, probably just going on dates, right? I spoke calmly about what I had been thinking. Seeing that my husband didn't say anything back, it seemed that I wasn't far off the mark. My father-in-law, hearing this, was furious again. Is this true? As my husband averted his gaze, my father-in-law's fist hit him in the face. My father-in-law bowed deeply to me. Ellie, I'm truly sorry for my stupid son. My husband was also made to bow alongside his father and was interrogated. You should be the one apologizing. Tell the whole truth. The woman my husband had cheated with was close to what I had guessed. She was a younger woman who had transferred from another branch, and my husband, who was in charge of her training, seemed to have developed the affair. Moreover, it seemed she was also married, although she didn't have a child. I was flabbergasted and quickly filled out the divorce papers. I thrust them back at my husband. Write it down quickly. Ellie, I'm sorry, please reconsider. I admit my mistakes. I could only look at my apologetic husband with cold eyes. No way. I don't need someone who won't be there for me when I'm hurting the most. I don't want to see your face anymore. You thought our son wasn't yours, so you don't have to see him again. Well, I will take child support though. Prompted by my father-in-law, my husband filled out the divorce papers. When my father-in-law is a witness, we discussed alimony and child support. While all this was happening, my mother-in-law, who had taken my son somewhere, returned. She silently handed something to my husband. A confused George took it and opened it to find an old photo album. In it was a picture of a baby who looked just like our son now. It looks just like him. There's no way he's not your child. My mother-in-law coldly dropped the bomb. Pictures from the time when George was born, he looks just like our son. Seeing that, George was utterly shocked. But he doesn't look anything like me. He started to make excuses. At that point, I lost my patience. If a newborn baby looked exactly like you as an adult, wouldn't that be scary? Didn't you realize that? Looking at that photo, it's undoubtedly your child. No, it's not that. It's just, everyone kept saying it. I believed it from the beginning. Liar, if you believed it, you wouldn't have insisted on a DNA test. Always blaming others. Take some responsibility for your actions. You were neglecting your pregnant wife and having an affair. That's a fact. It doesn't change. Moreover, you were swayed by your mistress, doubted your wife, and even did a DNA test with your newborn son. Is there any sincerity in any of these actions? None, right? While I was suffering, you were having an affair. I am not so generous to forgive someone like that. I launched into him without even taking a breath. George kept apologizing, but of course, I didn't forgive him. We ended up getting a divorce. Rumors about George's affair spread at work, making his job difficult and causing him to make mistake after mistake. As a result, he was transferred to a different branch in Nebraska. I thought about moving back to my parents' house, but considering it's not good to travel long distances postpartum, I've been living in George's now empty family home, and my son is growing up healthy. George was severely scolded by his parents, and he has been using his savings to pay alimony. Under the watchful eye of his father-in-law, he pays the alimony every month. Of course, we've also sought damages from the woman he had the affair with. Thanks to that, her husband found out about the affair, which was a double betrayal, and they ended up divorcing. I heard she's now working at a bar. George was a foolish husband, but I'm grateful for the support of in-laws who are there to watch our son grow up with me. I am very satisfied.
My name is Jennifer. I'm a 25-year-old working professional. Currently, I live with my grandmother and commute to work from her house. The reason I live with my grandmother is because my mother passed away from an illness. My mother got sick when I was 3 years old, and it seemed like there was no hope for her recovery. At that time, my father was apparently having an affair, despite my mother's illness. When my mother passed away when I was 5, my father must have found me a burden. He left me with his mother, my grandmother, and disappeared somewhere. Having no siblings and losing both parents, I ended up being raised by my grandparents. Feeling lonely, I would ask every day, "When will Dad come to pick me up?" But my grandparents would just give a bitter smile each time. Gradually, I understood that I had been abandoned by my father. Still, my grandparents, who were in their 50s at the time, raised me with all their might. My grandmother, who had been a housewife, started working part-time so I wouldn't starve. And she bought me beautiful clothes and toys. My grandparents must have been worried about their own retirement. But when I was about to take my high school entrance exam, my grandmother said this to me. You don't have to be fixated on going to a public high school. Go wherever you want. But if I do that, I'll be a burden on you and Grandpa. It's okay. We still have some savings. No, I'll try my best to get into a public high school. I'll definitely pass, so please support me. All right, then you have to give it your all. And I successfully got into one of the top public high schools. My grandparents were happy for me, and my grandfather even made a reservation at a restaurant. I felt so fortunate to be celebrated by such kind grandparents. I enjoyed my high school life, but one day I came home to a somber atmosphere. I asked my grandmother what had happened, and it turned out that my grandfather had been diagnosed with an illness. His condition worsened rapidly, and he began going in and out of the hospital frequently. At that time, my grandfather had retired, so my grandmother had to support the family by working multiple part-time jobs. His hospital bills were covered by life insurance, but then my grandmother became unable to work due to exhaustion. That's when she decided to seek help from the government and went to the city office. Yes, she applied for public assistance. The process seemed very complicated, but somehow the application was approved. However, I spent my days wondering what would happen in the future. The high school I attended was a college prep school, so everyone went on to college. I was surprised to hear at the city office that welfare households could not go to college unless they separated their households. However, separating households also reduces the welfare benefits, which is tough. I wanted to go to college, but it was also difficult to go that far, so I decided to work as soon as possible to repay my grandparents. My grandmother tearfully said to me, I'm so sorry this happened. It's all because of your father. It's because I didn't raise him properly. It's not like that. Grandpa and Grandma took good care of me. I'll work hard, so don't worry. I feel so pathetic. You wanted to go to college, and now I'm sorry. Then I got a job at 18. By that time, I was able to make a living without welfare. However, my grandfather's condition was already deteriorating, and he was told he only had a half a year left. In the end, he left me with these words, Jennifer, I'm sorry for all the trouble. Grandpa, it's not like that. Please take care of your grandma. I love you. Grandpa! After cremating my grandfather, I worked even harder. I worked a lot of overtime so my grandmother wouldn't have to work part-time anymore. Time flew by, and I turned 25. I was so busy every day that I didn't have time to have a boyfriend. Besides, I couldn't be proactive in love because I thought I might have a handicap from being abandoned by my father. Then one day, I got a call from someone. It was about my father, whom I hadn't been in touch with for a long time, had passed away. He died in a traffic accident. He was my biological father, but I didn't feel a shred of sadness. My grandmother didn't show any signs of sadness either, even though her own son had died. Well, maybe she was actually sad, but she might have hated her son for having an affair and leaving his child behind. It seems my father had told his remarried wife the address of our house. So his remarried wife came to visit our house and said this. Well, John has passed away, as we've already informed you, but now there's an issue with the inheritance. Would you mind relinquishing your inheritance rights? We don't have any children, so it turns out you also have rights, which is a problem for us. Well, that's fine. I never really thought of him as my father anyway. I don't need anything now. Great, so you'll relinquish. Wait, I'm not giving up my rights. What? I'm asserting my rightful claim. While it's true that I have mixed feelings about my son's death in a car accident, I can't say I'm not sad, but I'm much angrier that he abandoned young Jennifer to go to you. So of course, I'll assert my rights. Is that all you wanted to say? Yes. Then please leave. My grandmother smiled at me and said, that was the right thing to do. And the woman left. Apparently, my father and his second wife had no children, and lived a lavish lifestyle together. It seems my playboy father was quite the entrepreneur. He made a fortune in the real estate business. After that, my grandmother called a relative. He happened to be a lawyer. She seemed to be asking if he could mediate the inheritance issue, as she didn't want any conflict. Soon after, that relative uncle came to our house. He agreed with my grandmother. Inheritance disputes can get messy, but in this case, I think you're right, Grandma. Why? I don't want any of the money left by the father who abandoned me. It's tainted. But Jennifer, your grandma did her best to raise you. She put you first, above her own retirement plans. I know that. And don't you think she resents the woman who seduced her son? Don't you agree? I understand how you feel, Jennifer, but let's try to be more mature about this. Okay. I have been stubbornly refusing my father's inheritance, but I started to reconsider. Money they could have saved for their retirement. Raising me must have cost my grandparents a lot of money. They must have spent a lot of money to raise me, although I am sure they were saving for their retirement. They even sent me to tutoring classes in middle school and celebrated special occasions with me. Thinking about it that way, I decided to understand my grandmother's feelings, so I changed my mind and decided to claim my inheritance rights after all. When we informed the second wife, she was furious. In the end, it all comes down to money, even after someone's death. After carefully reconsidering, I've decided to claim my rights. What? I should have never told you people. It's too late now. We have a lawyer in our family, after all. You? How dare you pull such a sneaky trick? I don't want to hear about being sneaky. It's my legitimate right. You were abandoned by your parents, and now you act all high and mighty? Oh, it seems you're not aware that you were also played. What? Turns out, my father had other women as well. He didn't have children with them, though. Wait, what are you talking about? When my father passed away, a woman came demanding his inheritance like a fool. When we talked, surprise, surprise, she was his mistress. Can you believe it? She's a fool for claiming the inheritance while being his mistress. And she wasn't the only one. There were 3 of them. I was shocked, and my jaw dropped. No way. Well, at least they didn't have children. I'm going to claim a significant portion of the inheritance. That's my inheritance. No, don't be selfish. It's mine too, LOL. The remarried wife was sobbing. Of course she would be. The man she thought loved her faithfully had other women. I realized how much of a fool my father was. It's a good thing he didn't have children with them. In the end, I inherited my father's estate. At first, I didn't want anything from such a father, but I had to understand my grandmother's situation better. I gave the money to my grandmother saying, "Please use it for the future." I'm sorry for what I said before, but I realized something. It must have been hard raising me, right? I want you to use this money for your future. Jennifer, but I can't use all of it. It's okay. But what about when you get married someday? Save some of it for that. Grandma, don't worry about me. But then my feelings are, all I want is to see you happily married someday. Of course, it's fine if you don't get married too. Just live your life the way you want. You don't have to stay here forever. But what about you, Grandma? A year later, I met a wonderful man at a social gathering. We dated, and we got married. When he proposed, I was thrilled. He understood my family situation and suggested we live together with my grandmother. I felt terrible, but he said, "Let's be good to your grandma." At the wedding, my grandmother cried her eyes out. I felt like I could finally repay her kindness that day. I'd be happy if I could become even more dependable and put my grandmother at ease in the future.
My name is Samantha. It's been 4 years since I graduated from vet school, and now I'm a 28-year-old working at a dog specialist clinic. Currently, I live alone near the clinic to manage the night shift, but my 6-year older brother and my 2-year younger brother visit me on their way to and from work and on holidays bringing me home-cooked meals from our mother. Considering I'm not too skilled in the kitchen, I'm truly grateful. The other day, my brother Mark swung by after work.
"Hey, you about to finish your shift? I have something to discuss, so how about grabbing dinner together?" he said.
Sounds good, but I'm beat from being on my feet all day. How about we get takeout and eat at my place? I replied.
Fair enough. Then lend me your keys. I'll pick up something from the food court at the mall nearby, he said.
Okay, and sorry if it's a bit messy in there. Haha. It was odd for Mark to have something to discuss with me. Unlike my younger brother, who comes to me for advice on everything from love stories to money troubles, Mark isn't usually the one initiating serious conversations. And he's not the type to complain about his job either, so I was a bit on edge, as I headed home wondering what it could be about.
Listen, I understand you're busy with work, but you need to clean up a bit more regularly. You can't even invite a boyfriend over with the place looking like this, haha. Mark chuckled.
Hey, mind your own business. I've been working a lot of night shifts recently. By the time I get home and wake up, it's nearly evening. Between catching up on household chores and going back to work, it becomes too late to start vacuuming. If it comes down to cleaning or doing laundry, laundry wins, I retorted.
Well, at least take out the trash more often, haha, he replied.
Alright. So, was your big talk just to lecture me on my lifestyle? I asked.
No, actually. There's a potential marriage proposal on the table, he said.
What? Marriage? Who's getting married? I exclaimed.
You don't think I'd be talking about a marriage proposal for you, do you? He smirked.
Wait, you mean you're getting married? Are you kidding me? I asked in shock.
Whoa, are you calling me a liar? That's rude, haha. He laughed it off.
This is my brother Mark. Athletic and outgoing at first glance, he might seem like the picture-perfect professional, but the truth is, he went to an all-boys school through middle school and high school, studied a science major in college, and was always involved in athletic clubs. As a result, he spent most of his student life surrounded by men and struggles with the subtleties of understanding others' feelings, let alone dealing with women. Hearing the word marriage coming from such a brother was quite a surprise for me.
Well, to be honest, I still have some doubts, he admitted.
So, who's the one marrying you? Someone I know? I asked.
Well, you might know her or might not, he mused.
Seriously, who is it? I inquired.
It's Professor Smith's daughter, the professor who supervised you. Her name is Sarah. I think you both graduated from the same university, but you might not be familiar with her since you were in different departments, he revealed.
What? No way! I let out a shrill scream that seemed to come from the top of my head, and for good reason. If my memory serves me correctly, my brother's bride-to-be is a woman who could be described as my nemesis. The university I graduated from is a massive private university with numerous departments and a large number of students. My department, veterinary medicine, was located far from the main campus, so most students graduate with little interaction with students from other departments. However, I joined a board game club that I had loved since I was a child. As a result, I was blessed with friends and seniors from various departments. But the one who threatened the joy out of our harmonious club activities was none other than Sarah, a member of the club next door to ours. Sarah, the daughter of a professor at our university, was a standout beauty even among the in-house students. She was the kind of female student who was always surrounded by admirers in event-based clubs. But when her club was suspended due to activities against the university's regulations, Sarah, with too much time on her hands, temporarily joined our club. Initially, we were perplexed, but we accepted her, hoping to introduce her to the charm of board games. But Sarah's objective was not board games, of course. She was there to stir up the club, quite literally. One couple that fell victim to her was my best friend Linda and Jack. Linda and Jack were an official couple since high school and enrolled in the same architecture department. They had a dream of owning an architecture firm together in the future. However, Jack fell easily before Sarah's tricks. On our way back from a trip with other female friends, when Linda and I stopped by Jack's apartment to deliver souvenirs, we ran into Sarah wearing his shirt from inside his room. What is this? Why is Sarah here?
Well, this is...
Don't dodge my question, answer me. And Sarah, you answer too. Why are you doing this? Hey, don't make a scene. You're being a nuisance to the neighbors, you know. Haha. Besides, I had no idea he had a girlfriend. Ha. So you're saying you were behind Linda and the others breaking up, weren't you?
Is that true? Does that mean you've done this with Bob and Mark too?
Cause trouble? That's a mean way to put it, ha ha ha. I just thought that he wouldn't break up with his girlfriend over a meal or two. If he likes me that much, well, I can't help it, can I? Ha ha ha. As an excuse, it's a pretty terrible one. Jack, what about this woman do you like so much that you betrayed Linda?
Wait, Sarah, you're joking, right? You're serious about me, not like with Bob and Mark, right? Tell me that's right.
What? Serious? Me with you? That's obviously impossible. Ha ha ha.
No way.
Just think about it. Do you really think a man like you, out of nowhere, could be a match for me? You touched a star for a moment, so you should cherish that as a lifetime memory. Oh, but maybe you used up your lifetime's luck. Ha ha ha. As Jack crumbled, Sarah quickly changed her clothes and came over to where Linda and I were standing with grim faces at the entrance. Then, pushing crying Jack towards us, she said, this is just too much trouble. Here, take him back, will ya? Ha ha. Besides, I don't remember making him mine. Ha ha ha. Stunned by her words, we watched as she added, I'd be bothered if he kept acting like a boyfriend, so it might be better if you just take him back. You two should get back together. Recycle, reuse? Whatever you want, haha, before she walked away toward the main street. After that, I dragged Linda to our apartment and we took turns staying over until her emotions settled. In the end, Linda and Jack broke up and Jack dropped out of university. In the end, the group was filled with people who had been messed with by Sarah and became ex-couples with a similar history, leading to an awkward atmosphere and members quitting one after another, causing the club to collapse. Frankly, I have nothing but memories of the latter half of my fun college days being ruined by Sarah. It was quite a shock when the topic of marriage between Sarah and my brother came up. When I asked, how on earth did you two meet? My brother said, well, it's not so much that we met, but the vice president of a client company I'm working with said, I have a niece who hasn't gotten married yet, would you like to meet her? And since I didn't have a reason to refuse and I wasn't dating anyone, I agreed to meet her. For some reason she liked me, and things just went really fast from there. Huh, but are you okay with that, bro? I think marriage is a pretty big decision. Honestly, I don't really care either way, haha, he said rather casually. Actually, my brother Mark has a somewhat careless, hands-off attitude when it comes to important decisions, even though he doesn't appear to take them seriously. And when he realizes the consequences of his decisions aren't good for him, he has no problem cutting his losses and moving on without any shame. He hardly ever considers how much trouble he causes to those around him. It's really unbearable for those who get caught up in his mess. But if you think about it, as long as there's no malice involved, it's only slightly better than Sarah, who is just as irresponsible in her own way. At this point, it might be wise to leave them alone unless the sparks fall on us. Huh? Did you say something? Nope, it's nothing. After that, the marriage talks between Mark and Sarah were officially confirmed, and the two families proceeded with formalities like meeting each other and exchanging gifts. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I had a hard time taking weekends off, so I was unable to attend any of those events, and the day of Mark's wedding came. On that auspicious day blessed with clear weather, I had finally managed to take a day off to attend Mark's wedding. First, there was a pre-wedding photo shoot at the chapel in the hotel, and since the photographer allowed the family members to take pictures with their cameras and smartphones, the photo shoot started with both families watching. Sarah and Mark, dressed in a tailcoat and wedding dress, made quite the picturesque couple. I was busy taking photos myself when, several times, my eyes met Sarah's through the camera lens. After the photo shoot went smoothly, we had a quick rehearsal for the ceremony, and then it was time for family introductions. The groom's side introduction started with my father, and when it was my turn, Sarah's expression changed for a moment. The bride's side introduction went smoothly as well, and during the break before the ceremony, I was talking with other family members in the waiting room when a staff member brought a note from Sarah calling for me. When I went to the bride's waiting room, she said, "No way, seriously? I can't believe it, haha. What's so unbelievable? Oh, that we're going to be sister-in-laws? It's quite a coincidence, isn't it? I can't believe it either." Ugh, I knew he had a sister, but I thought there was no way it would be you with the same name. Talk about being caught off guard, haha. So, you wrote on the note that you had something to say. Then, seemingly irked, Sarah smacked the table with a bang. However, I no longer had any need to care about Sarah. I don't want to see your smug face throughout this whole wedding ceremony and reception. You've finally become a vet, right? You've always excused yourself from participating in events because of work, so why don't you just go make up some excuse about being called in urgently and go home right now? You look better in your grubby white coat than in a dress you're not used to wearing after all. I was momentarily taken aback, but on reflection, there was indeed no need for me to grace the event with my presence. So, with a broad smile like a waiter at some bar, I gladly left the bride's waiting room saying, "Sure thing, with pleasure." At the cloakroom, I collected my coat and promptly set off home. However, the next day, Sarah, who was supposed to be going on her honeymoon, showed up at the animal hospital where I work, all alone, and began to scream at me. "Hey, what's the deal? Why are you acquainted with my uncles? What's the fuss about so early in the morning? You're scaring the dogs we have here for care." "I don't care about the dogs. I have bigger problems." As Sarah continued to raise her voice, I decided to get permission from the hospital director to take her to the double-doored operation room to have a talk. "So, what do you want to talk about? Is it okay for you to be here? I heard you were going on your honeymoon this afternoon." "There's no honeymoon. The wedding itself is likely to be canceled." "Oh, why's that? I thought my brother would be thrilled to be marrying such a sought-after woman." "That's what I thought too, but after the reception yesterday, he was talking for a long time with my aunt and uncle, and then he suddenly said, 'I'm calling off this wedding.'" "Oh really? My brother has quite a bold move, doesn't he?" "It's not funny, and my aunt and uncle, instead of reprimanding him, they started saying things to me like, 'We won't consider you our niece anymore, you ungrateful, shameless girl. We don't know a daughter like you. You must have done something, confess.'" At that point, I explained that I had not done anything on my end, just that I happened to know Sarah's aunt and uncle. After the family introductions, I had a conversation with them saying, "What a coincidence," and was then told by Sarah to go home, so I just went home. But then I got a message from Sarah's aunt and uncle, who found it strange that I didn't attend the wedding or reception, and I just answered honestly to their questions. "Honestly, what did you tell them?" Well, first I said that I went home because you told me I was annoying. Then they asked, why would Sarah say such a thing to the bride's sister? And I suggested, maybe it's due to some grudges from our student days. "What? What were you thinking? Of course they would ask more questions." So I honestly recounted our past as accurately as I could remember it. "But that should only anger your brother. Why would my aunt and uncle be furious?" That's when I explained the reason why Sarah's aunt and uncle might have been furious. In fact, Sarah's aunt and uncle do not have any children, and they are crazy about their pet Shih Tzu. When they were walking their Shih Tzu, they had a horrible collision with a sports bike that suddenly rushed out of a crossroad. The dog was seriously injured and rushed to this vet clinic. An emergency surgery was necessary, but the dog had lost a lot of blood, and it seemed like the blood available from the clinic's own donation dogs would not be sufficient in time. That's when the clinic got in touch with volunteer dog owners who had registered to donate blood in emergency situations. The one who came running was Linda and her beloved pet. Linda is an architect designer working for a major company after her graduation. She adopted a puppy born at the home of a client she had become friendly with and kept it as a pet. Thanks to Linda's dog, the Shih Tzu surgery was a success. As a token of their deep gratitude, the couple requested Linda's company to renovate their vacation house. They got even closer to Linda and were enraged when they heard her complain while she was tipsy about a shameless woman who ruined her relationship with her college boyfriend. However, they hadn't asked Linda for the name of the woman, considering it inappropriate. When they heard my story, they realized that the shameless woman was their own niece, Sarah. Then they confessed everything to my parents, my brother, and Sarah's parents, while also declaring the disownment of Sarah. My brother, for whom Sarah was a precious niece of a major client, no longer saw any point in marrying her, as her value as a sales point vanished. However, I didn't understand why Sarah's parents were also furious and kicked their daughter out. After all, Sarah's father, Professor Smith, was also my teacher back in college, was known for his deep love for his daughter, and had always been the one to clean up her messes. My father is also close to retirement. He was planning to open a vet clinic. Really? The professor? But setting up a clinic, securing parking space and all, the costs are tremendous. There's no way he could cover all that with just his retirement money. He was planning to ask his brother for a loan. But now, after all this, they are saying this is all because you failed to raise your daughter properly, and it looks like they won't lend him any money. That's why they are all cutting ties with me. It seems like it's too late for them to realize their mistake though, Stop joking around and help me out. I don't think I can do anything about this. Please, I'll do anything. I'll even kneel down. I don't know how much your kneeling is worth, but I really don't need that, Even after that, she kept begging me tearfully, but in the end, the clinic's director had to call the cops to stop her from causing a disturbance. Reluctantly, she left. When Sarah realized she couldn't persuade me, she ran to my brother, Mark, and to her aunt and uncle, begging them while crying. But they didn't listen to her. Moreover, Sarah's bad reputation spread from her aunt and uncle to her relatives and from the relatives to the other people she knew until nobody paid any attention to her anymore. She quit her job and started living in an old apartment managed by a distant relative that her image-conscious parents rented for her. As for me, I'm busy every day with my job as a vet, which I believe is my true calling. On the other hand, my unrepentant brother Mark seems quite pleased, saying, "Now that I've become a man who can no longer dream of marriage, people might sympathize with me, but at least I won't have to deal with any unnecessary meddling." Our parents seem to have a headache with their children, including my younger brother, who don't seem to have any prospects for romantic relationships, but they believe that everything happens for a reason. So, they decide to take it easy and not